have a dream, oh, I have a dream. Red, white, and blue, fly free, fly free. I believe, oh, I believe. Will you dream with me?
Good morning, everyone out there. Welcome to Changing Times. This is Wednesday, March the 8th. It's kind of a rainy, gloomy day out there, but it's going to get better. We're just about 2 weeks away from spring here in Southwest Missouri. We are live at the Axe Media Group headquarters in Springfield, and we have got a great show today. You know, our show, for all the people that's watching this live today, and we'll be watching it later on, our show is about social issues, social causes. This is probably one of the biggest social issues that we have. This actually concerns the fate of the United States, our country that we all live in. And so we've got a very special guest, Larry Ballard. Larry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Well, I tell you what, we are glad that you're here. Now, people, you may want to get a paper and pencil and write down some notes. There's going to be some very interesting things. And then I'm Lynn Morris.
And I'm Don Blackard.
Yes, you are. And I tell you what, we are glad to be here. This is show number 99. What a God-led miracle story for Don and I to be doing this for 99 shows. We're going to be soon 2 years. So we'll have a little birthday cake or cupcakes or something when we get to 2 years. And it's always fun because I love cupcakes and sweets and stuff like. Maybe I'll even throw some ice cream in because I like all flavors.
Got to go big.
Yeah. So 2 years is pretty good. And we've got Jody Myers. She's our volunteer producer. Everybody on
our beautiful producer with a big smile.
She
big
is.
glow.
She is. I tell you what, she's awesome, and she's got an awesome husband and Mark, and she's got Jaden over there. Her daughter's right behind her, and we got one of the dogs in the studio, and I've already fed it treats and her treats and things like that. So anyway, that's why we are. We're live on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitter. We're also seen today on LinkedIn, Daily Motion, Rumble. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I mean, right away. So I've got, Larry, you wrote this book called Liberty Crusade. And out of this book, we're going to be talking about some things that you actually had messages from God. You had a near-death experience.
Yes.
Back in 1968, I believe. And during that, you know, a lot of people, I mean, unfortunately, you have these accidents, and then God speaks to people, and he's continued to speak to you, and he's told you what to do, and he's told you to research and to look into this and study that and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about that near experience and how that, you know, what you got out of it and where we're at today. And then we're going to talk about the rise and the decline, the fall of China. Now, a lot of people are going to say that's not right. That's not going to happen. Well, I think God is always right, you know, and so we're going to talk about why you think that. And because I don't think God misleads people. And so I want you to listen to this. And while some people will say this is controversial, sure, it may be controversial, but it's probably true, isn't it? So
it is.
Yeah. So go ahead. What happened, and then what did God transform you into?
I was in college. I took a ride on a motorcycle, went around a curve, careened off a cliff. My motorcycle went airborne over the cliff, landed in a tree. I hit a tree head on and was unconscious for 4 hours. And I had a visitation in heaven, and it changed my entire life. Right. God hijacked my life, and he gave me an assignment. He said, you're going to have a lifelong assignment. You're not going to go out until your hair is salt and pepper, until the world is ready to hear the truth. Well, now I think people have heard enough that their eyes are awakening, and now God's called me out to deliver that message. And here was my preparation. He said, read the Bible, read the Quran. He said, read history, anthropology, archaeology, geology, climatology, a whole host of things. So I've been a self-learner my entire life. He said, I'm going to have you travel all over the world and place you in nations of significance at significant tipping points in history so that you can see history unfolding. And he said, I'm going to have you change jobs about every 3 years, and every job will be strategic. So let me just give you one or two to kick us off. I was working in construction going through college, building skyscrapers. I didn't know it was important, but I was working with something called thermite, burns at 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And 9/11, I knew instantaneously those towers did not come down because of jet fuel. They came down because of thermite, because the columns were cut in the basement. I worked for Monsanto Chemical, so I'd learn about GMOs. I worked for Atomic Energy Canada, so I'd understand energy was a control mechanism. And they were also under socialized medicine. I saw two good friends die from cancer before they ever got to see a doctor. So I knew that that was a control mechanism. I was in China just prior to Tiananmen Square getting some tool and die making done, and I got to see their sweatshops. And instantaneously, I knew what they were going to do. They were going to steal our tool and die industry, steal our patents, and come into our country and encroach us with trade. And then I worked for a French firm, and I saw the formation of the European Union. And I knew later, I found out that the UN, which is one of the most evil institutions in the world, their goal was to end all sovereign nations and form 10 servile trading blocs. The first one of those was the EU. So that gives you a little bit of what God has put me through. It's been a 50-year journey. And now it's time to tell the story.
Well, and we really appreciate you. And you're doing that with this book. And then also, Jill Reynolds, that was part of Acts Ministry, she had that, sponsored that program down in a couple thousand people. You went there, didn't you, Don, back last summer when they had that? You were there. And so you were one of the program speakers for that, weren't you?
I met Jill at the Reawaken America tour in Branson.
Yeah. Okay, you met her. And then the company that printed this book, because books are expensive to print. They're, it's a lot of money. It's an investment before you ever make any money back. Don published her first book last December. And so, or is that the December before? I've lost track of time. But anyway, someone printed this book.
Well, there's a story about that too.
Yeah, so they printed the book at no cost because they valued this information so much and believed in what you were saying and doing that they said, well, we'll help you give this book out to people. And today, if we're going to give you my email address out later on, because I want to give some books out, and I'll pay the postage, and we're going to mail this book out to people that's watching our show, and hopefully they will be a disciple and just keep sharing this information out. So we're going to do that.
I want to tell you how it got printed.
Okay.
I sent it to every major publisher that I knew of. Every one of them rejected it immediately. And how it got published is Harrison House turned me down. 2 months later, I got a call from someone at Harrison House. It was the lady who ultimately published the book. She asked me, Mr. Ballard, did you get that book published? And then she said, no, don't answer that. She says, the answer is no. She says, you hit the nail on the head. You told the truth. The powers to be are never going to let you publish that book. She said, but I'm leaving Harrison House. I know the publishing business. I'm opening up my own small publishing firm. I have a chain of Christian bookstores. I'm going to be in Fayetteville at one of those stores in a few weeks. I want you to come down and meet me. I walked in. The first thing she said is she held up her copy of the book. She says, God told me that the first thing I am to do with this publishing firm is to publish your book for nothing because the truth has to go out.
Amen.
That's how this book got published.
See, all those are just God-led miracle stories,
Absolutely.
One after another. And I'm hoping that everyone understands the power of God. And so we're going to jump right in. So, right now, we've seen the rise of China, and it's at a high level. And you're right. They've actually pirated a lot of our technology. They've pirated everything that they can. We saw the air balloons, the supposedly weather balloons. We've seen them floating around our country and going from military base to military base and things like this. And so obviously, I don't think they're much of a ally or a friend. I think they're only for themselves, unfortunately. And so. We want to just talk a little bit about the rise, and then we're going to talk about the decline too.
Yep. When you talk about China, something God showed me. This was a hard taught lesson. Because of the rise of the central banking system of the world, all but 3 nations of the world have a central bank. And Stalin said, Formation of a central bank within a nation is 90% of establishing communism. So when we talk about China, here's what you have to do. You have to broaden your horizon. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, America have all had their governments at some point taken over by the global elite. So we have to think of this in a bigger context. Yes, it's China, but they're controlled and puppeted by the global elite. So the global elite have a goal of ending all sovereign nations and establishing a 10-nation trading bloc coalition, which would be the mark of the beast, the system of the beast. So that's where China plays. They are trying to be the entity that controls us. And they were basically put into power with the money from us because the global elite have bought many of our politicians, and they then came in. So we'll start with Carter. And when Carter came into office, his assignment was start the decline of America and the rise of China, because what we want to have is a super capitalist communist economy. And what does that mean? Capitalism, the people have got skin in the game, and they're not going to just cow down to somebody. But communism, everybody is basically passive. So what they need is an economy that is innovative, capitalism, but that can be controlled, communism. That's what the mark of the beast requires. So basically, from Carter's time on, our government has been systematically putting that form of government into place. So China was risen, and here's how it happens. There's a formula for how any nation becomes the superpower of the world. They have to gain control of the natural resources. They have to gain control of manufacturing. They have to gain control of trade. And then those are sold and give them an unlimited amount of money with which to buy power and influence at every strata of society. They buy our media, they buy our corporate leaders, they buy our politicians. So that's what's been going on since the time of Carter. And basically they have taken the trade from us because they placed us under intentionally losing trade programs under NAFTA, which was the worst trade policy agreement ever put into power. And it has siphoned America's wealth. When we went into that agreement, we were over 200 years old, and we had a scant $660 million national debt. As soon as that hit, we started doubling and tripling our national debt with every president, and now we're at 30 trillion. So we've been intentionally bled out.
I think President Trump was against the NAFTA agreement when he came in office. Right?
He put in a new agreement, and he called it fair. Instead of fair trade, he changed it, and basically he put tariffs against China so that China's products cost too much, and that's how he stimulated the economy. So let's look at what he did compared to how China rose. He gave us back control of our natural resources, or oil, gas, or steel. He changed the regulations that were holding us down from innovation so that our economy started to grow and we got new manufacturing plants in. He put tariffs against China so that we could get our trade. And with that, the formula was then put back into place to make America great. And we rose. Stock market went from 10,000 to 30,000 in no time flat. And then as soon as Biden came in, the usurper of the throne, he turned those policies around and did exactly what Carter had did, and America began to fall again.
Right. And one of the things that you mentioned, Larry, and I think this is important, I just saw just this week a rating of the different, we'll say, enemies of this country. And China was number one. But, interesting enough, the last rating they had, which I think America is waking up, and you're helping wake people up, is because the number fifth or sixth enemy of this country is the enemy from within. The enemy within our own country. We have people right here in our own country working with people outside our country trying to destroy our country. And so now I bet you 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, you wouldn't see that on that survey. You'd see China and Russia and different people, but you wouldn't see that. And so that's interesting. So China's at the top, and now you've got revelations from God that China is not going to be a superpower. It's going to be a regional power. There's going to be a decline. And by the way, we're not going to get through all this. And so what Larry and I have already talked about, our shows, Don and I, what we do is we don't want to do negative stories, and we always want to have a positive ending. if we don't get to it today, I don't want you to despair and get all upset and excited about what we're saying. I want you to know there is a happy ending, and it's through God that is going to give us a happy ending.
Amen.
So we may not get there today, but he's going to come back. And he's going to come back until we get this story told that God has told him that's what's going to happen in this country, right? So now we got the decline. They're going to be a regional power, right?
Right. Before we go to that, you spurred something else I want to talk about.
Okay.
I want to take us to 1933. Remember, I'm an historian. God says that there's nothing new under the sun. It's a circle never beginning, never ending. So if we go back, we can find tipping points in history that are replicable. And if we see what they are today, and we see they've played out and repeated themselves, we can actually look to the future, predict the future. So something pinnacle happened in America that relates to this story in 1933. In the heart of the Great Depression, we went bankrupt. And the bankers took us over, the receivers of the bank records, which is the central bank. And in our political system, it says that as of that date in 1933, the U.S. government is no longer functional, that basically we are no longer a republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, but we are now a democracy, a socialist communist order. At that moment in time, an entire army of bureaucrats was placed within the federal government to usurp our laws and to change us. So we're not only fighting China, we're fighting the very government that we think is in favor of us, and we're fighting the global elite. So we have a war going on 3 different fronts. So now pose your other question and I'll answer.
Yeah, so we're going to see the decline of China, and it's going to be a regional power, which is still a powerful country, but it's not going to be a threat to the United States. Is that correct?
Yes. 2 years ago, people would have said I was crazy to say this, but it's absolutely going to happen. So let's run through some of the flaws that they have. The first flaw is that they have created an absolutely unique economic system. It's not just a super capitalist communist economy, but after Tiananmen Square, and I was in Tiananmen Square 2 weeks before the massacre. So I saw what was going on in China. The people of China were ready to just absolutely revolt. And what happened is the government came to and says, listen, if you'll tolerate communism, we won't have any more massacres, and we'll give you job security and increase your standard of living. And everybody said, okay, we'll live in peace. Now that's changed. Now there are so many things that have happened. The global supply chain is being pulled away from China, and it started in mass with COVID-19. And that represents 53% of their entire economy. Their real estate market is collapsing. That represents 33% of their entire economy. So if you do the numbers, that's 86% of their economy is at jeopardy. And I'm not saying that they're going to lose 86%.
Right.
Even if they lose half of that, that's catastrophic. The government has collapsed at that point. So China is in real trouble. And what that's done is it's taken those people who agreed to be peaceful, as long as you gave them a good standard of living. They've lost their jobs. There's an older population that doesn't have any safety net. And so what we're seeing is mass revolts happening in China. The first was in Wuhan, and that was over the banking failures that were going on. And then we had the real estate collapse with Evergrande, was 33% of their economy. And we culminated after all of those. Here's what happened. The first revolt or protest, they rolled off the tanks and people quit. But as it got worse, and the one that was really took them over the edge was the lockdown for COVID. 400 million people locked in their apartments, welded in. And so then we saw something that we thought we'd never see. We saw the bridge protest, and they held signs up, and the sign said, down with the CCP, down with JGP. So China has never been afraid of America. China is afraid of revolt from within, because there are 1.4 billion people in China, and there's only, the CCP has a few million, maybe a couple of million people. So we are many, they are few. What they're afraid of is an internal revolt. And that revolt is bubbling and boiling and can spew over and take that economy down at any point. But God's hand is in it as well. in a number of different ways. There were 17 dynasties in China. Did you know 5 fell through what I call acts of God? 5 fell because of water and food shortages. China has a major problem. Most of their population is in one region, and most of the water is in another region.
Right.
They have floods and they have droughts. Right now they have rivers that are so dry that are normally navigable, that are taking supply barges up and down the rivers. The rivers are completely dry, no flow. In the other part of the country, it's all flooded. So what they're on the tip of is an intervention from God, which has flooded their croplands and created a situation where they're on the crust of a food crisis. So 5 of those 17 dynasties fell from famine. China is in that position at this very moment in time.
Well, Larry, you know, when we go back and you talk about the uprising against the government, telling them they can't get out of their apartment, they can't get out of their house, and they actually were bolting doors. They actually locking doors from the outside where people couldn't even get outside. I don't know how they were going to eventually get out there on the road or something like that. They were doing all that. The government was doing all that, and the people rebelled, and they never expected the people to rise like this. I think this is a sign, a symptom of what you're talking about. And so you know what they did? The government gave in. The government wouldn't used to give in.
That's
Do
right.
you think they would have maybe 10 years ago give in and to that protest? No, but times are changing.
Yep.
And so that's really something. So I guess my next question would be, as China declines back to a regional power, and we actually have this collapse of our economy, whether it be in this country and around the world, because how America goes, how the world goes. Okay. And so what's that going to look like? How's that going to affect the world, this collapse? And how long do we have to go through that?
All right, well, let's start with China. And I think you're going to take us into America as well. So China's destined to fall. There's many more reasons that I could have brought up. So we just touched just the tip. So China falls, let's look what happens. That marks the movement away from globalization, because let's look now at Apple, the Foxconn facility. They have 100,000 people. That was another one of the protests. The people were saying, we're locked into the factory. We can't leave. We're sleeping on cots in dormitories. We can't even eat in the cafeteria. So they revolted. So Apple is doing what? They're now looking at 5 other countries to take their assembly of the iPhone to other countries. Countries all over the world are chomping at the bit to take the trade from China, and corporations are leaving. So the money that was flowing in as corporate investment is dried up. Companies are leaving. And remember, that's 53% of their economy. So as that supply chain is broken, it's going to change the demographics of the entire world. We're going to go through deglobalization as opposed to globalization. We're going to go to regionalization as opposed to globalization. So the world is telling us something. We don't want to any longer be dependent on a single source primarily for our supply chain. So let's look at what happened. If anybody tried to buy a car during COVID, they probably waited a year and a half.
Right.
Why? The cars were done. They were setting in the factories finished for want of a semiconductor chip. So we have become so specialized that something as simple as a tiny little chip can cost the auto industry trillions of dollars. Multiply that across a multitude of different product lines, and you see the problem that the world has. So we're now going to be forced to go to regionalizations, where basically on every continent, they have the capability to produce whatever we need to have produced. And so basically, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing.
Fine.
So anyway, basically, we're going to go into deglobalization. Now, something else is happening. We're in a war. We started out asking, are we in a war with China? Well, you may have heard of something called BRICS. That stands for 5 nations. B is Brazil. R is Russia. I is BR, I'm having brain freeze here. BRICS is Brazil. R is Russia. I is India, C is China, and S is South Africa. Now, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, America, we don't want to be controlled by your dollar anymore. You have placed sanctions on us and you've hurt our economies. We want to be able to break the petrodollar agreement that you have with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is now in concert with doing that and agreeing to do that. So what that is going to do is cause an influx of dollars back into the United States that it's eventually going to collapse the US dollar. So what we're seeing is two of the greatest superpowers of the world are both going to have an economic collapse. China's going to collapse because they're going to pull the trade away, and the US dollar is going to collapse because they're going to have a bucket of probably 5 or 6 different currencies, and that will take our control of the world away. And the world is saying, just like we don't want to be controlled by trade by China, we don't want to be controlled by the dollar. So when those two dynamics change, we're going to have what the global elite want, the financial reset. But it's not going to go the way they want. What God has shown me and what the facts show me is that China will fall, and there are so many things that are against it that it will go to only being a regional superpower. But that will create a vacuum in the global economy, and America will come shooting back like the phoenix. Just think about how quickly Trump came in and changed our economy and turned things around in no time flat by giving us what? Our natural resources. So Biden took them away. We're going to get them back. We're going to get our manufacturing back. We're going to get our trade. We're going to get control of our money. And that's important because then the supply of money that buys the politicians, that buys the media people, that buys the corporations, all dries up. And all of our enemies within, which is what you were talking about, no longer have vast amounts of money feeding them to get them to say what they want to have said. And so basically we get control back, and the world will need a strong America. America will come bouncing back in no time, and that's going to bring in a harvest of souls. That is what this is all about, because God is ultimately in control, and we're going to have the harvest of souls like we can't even imagine, and we're going to go over a period of years and have a new kingdom economy, which is a whole different show. But I just want to leave you with that thought.
So, Larry, I don't know all the stuff that you know. But I do know one thing. I'm not a bettor. I don't gamble. But if I was going to gamble my money, I would put my money on the American people. We only got, 350 million people. We don't have 1.5 billion people like China or other countries have, India and all that, to have the mass populations. But I would bet my money on the United States to do exactly what you say. If there's any country that can rebound and restart with a different type of economy and make it even better than it is today, it is the United States of America. And so, and you know what? And God has always been with the United States. That's how we won a lot of wars. We won wars that we weren't supposed to win, and things happened during all this time. The weather changed, and it helped the United States beat these people and all this stuff. So I think God is still with us. And so I think that's really good. Is it time to take a break, Jody?
Well, I want to say something real quick, Lynn. So as Larry was talking, the famous quote from Ron Paul, "Truth is treason in the empire of lies," comes to mind. But, freedom of speech is so important. People don't have to believe you, but we know that the Lord's hand is in everything. And we know, in the end that we win no matter how much, because we're going to spend eternity in heaven.
That's right.
And we know that there is going to be an outpouring, and we know that the harvest is coming, and we know that the people are going to come back to the Lord. I've already seen it. People are seeing, people coming back, opening up their eyes, realizing that we're in a different time. And I just want to say, going into this with our sponsors, we love that this is a platform for people to share, their viewpoints, and that we still are in America, and that you have the opportunity to listen or close your ears or, share it with people or change the channel. But I love that we live in America today, and we have this freedom to be able to share our thoughts. And we know that God is in our lives. We all talked about how he's been so instrumental, and just glad that you're on sharing your story, and we'll jump into our sponsors.
Sure. I tell you what, and one of our first sponsors, I'm going to jump the gun and change it a little bit, is Youngblood Motor Group. They are a great group. It's John Youngblood and John Whitaker. John sits right there where you do, Larry, and he's been on our show several times as we let sponsors come on and spend the whole 45 minutes with us. And he was talking about that there was a time a year ago when he didn't have any new cars on the lot. Mm-hmm. They sell Nissan and Kia, and they didn't have any new cars. You had to take a picture and point at the car that you wanted, and about a year later, they would deliver it to you. Mm-hmm. Because of those chips, those little mm-hmm. chips that I don't understand why they have to have so many chips in a car, but hundreds of chips in each car. But so you're exactly right what you were talking about. But Youngblood Motor Group been in business over 40 years, the oldest family-owned car group in the Southwest Missouri area. So, like I said, specializing in Nissan, Kia. The good thing is they also have over 150 used cars. Almost all of them are cars that are guaranteed. They service those cars and make sure that there's nothing wrong. So when you go out, those cars are warranted cars and things like that, because a lot of people can't buy a new car anymore. New cars are extremely expensive. Even used cars have gone up in price. But these guys give great service. I know for sure because I've bought my last 2 cars from them, both Grand Cherokee Jeeps, and I will continue to buy a car from them because not only do they give you great service before the car the purchase, but they give you great service after. And I love their people. And so I would highly recommend, if you're anywhere in the Southwest Missouri area, check Youngblood Motor Group on South Campbell. Got new cars on one side of the road and used cars on the other side of the road. So they're a great sponsor, and they do a lot of great things for us. They do a lot of great things for all the charities and stuff like that in Southwest Missouri. Our other sponsor, our first sponsor, Brad Pistow. We still got to get him on this spring. He is a certified fiduciary financial planner located in Ozark, Missouri. And he's written a couple of books. The first one is Safe Money Matters. And the second one is Bulletproof. And he has programs, because Janet and I use them, and a lot of Don's family, yep, we found out to use them. In fact, a lot of people use Brad Pistow and his son, Hunter. And what they do is they've got programs, and it just timed out right because, thank goodness, President Trump made me a couple extra $1 million while he was in office. And so I appreciate that. I retired at the perfect time, and I took my money that I had from Family Pharmacy that I'd had for 40 some years. And I took that plus the investment savings that President Trump caused the stock market to do that you mentioned. And I took that money and gave that to Brad Pistow for retirement. And what happens is I've never lost a penny. Not a penny, not a dollar. I've never lost any money while the stock market goes down. I'm still making 6 or 8% while the market's going down, but I'll never run out of money. He has programs where you never run out of money. That's the number one thing that you got to do when you retire. You don't want to be worrying every day, sitting on the couch, watching TV and all the doom and gloom and all the bad stuff going on and thinking about, I don't know if I'm going to live. How am I going to live? How am I going to afford to live? And so he's got programs that, and he's right there in Ozark, Missouri. He's licensed in several states. He has friends in all 50 states. He goes around and talks just like you're doing. He's going to be going around. He goes around all the country and writes articles, USA Today. He contributes to all kinds of things, and he can help you. And you can visit him. He doesn't charge anything. And you can call 581-9222, 417-581-9222, and they'll send you a book. Just like we're going to give away a few of these, he's going to send you a book, either Bulletproof or Safe Money Matters, and you can start right away learning about what you need to do. You're never too early to start thinking about retirement. You need to start early. We can see what inflation's doing to us right now. And so he's a great sponsor, and he does a lot of great things for us. Don and I sometimes will have a cause that we're working on, and he'll donate things to us, and we really appreciate people like that. And then our third sponsor is a tremendous guy. He's Louis Michael, and he's a realtor for The Firm, FIRM, down in Ozark, Missouri. And he's a tremendous realtor. And he's also an Elvis impersonator. He won first place in Nashville, Tennessee after Elvis died. With 250 people trying to be Elvis, he won number 1. That's also where he met his beautiful wife and a nurse here in Springfield, Missouri. But he, because he sounds like Elvis, and he comes here and sang songs for the people around the world. I told him one day, he was in our show, and I said, hey, when you sell a house this next time, tell the people that's buying the house that you'll do a little mini Elvis concert in the backyard. Because when you buy a house, you're probably not going to know anybody on the street. But the best way to do is to invite all these neighbors that you don't know, and you're going to get to know them. And everybody brings their lawn chair, and you have some refreshments, and you listen to the Elvis concert. And I said, you'll be the coolest person on the block. And so he does that. He actually does that. And then the thing that he really loves the most is he's the CEO of Choosing to Live. He almost committed suicide. He tells the story about the gun to his head, and he's just seconds away of pulling that trigger, and God spoke to him. God will speak to you. If you're ready, he will speak to you. And he spoke to Louis, and Louis threw the gun down. And so now what he does is he always tells people, you have a purpose, and choose to live. And he has this organization that tries to help people where they live their life out for the fullest and the purpose that God created, and don't take your life. And so that's our three sponsors. And so we're going to go right back into our show again. But so I guess the next thing is, what do you think it's going to look like with China being out of the picture and stuff like that? What do you have any idea? You see, God's time, we all know this. I know what my time is, and my clocks go on, and so we know 24 hours a day, we know 7 days a week, and so like that. I think end times, a lot of us believe that we are at the start of end times. I think there's a lot of signs out there that shows that. You go to a lot of different churches, and they'll preach that. I know Jim Whining, our CEO of Acts Ministry, he talks about end times, that we're in the beginning of end times. Now, how long is that going to take? Because that's God's time is different than our time. It could be shorter. It could be quicker. It could be longer. He gets to decide how that is. But what do you think the climate's going to be? What's going to be? How many years did God tell you, like, this is a progression? This is a process. Okay, this is not overnight. This has already been kind of going on, hasn't it, for
Absolutely.
a long time? I mean, and you read the Bible, you read the Bible, and you saw that it's a progression. So, what do you think the landscape will look like? What's going to happen?
One of the things God told me to do when he told me to write this book, the most important book I would read in my research other than the Bible was Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And so with that, he's a military strategist who, with an army of 30,000 men, defeated an army of 300,000 men. So God wants us to know we're in war. We've been in war. People are all nervous right now. That's why we're talking about China, because China is blustery. Well, we're going to attack Taiwan. We're going to attack the United States. We're going to cause World War III. Folks, we've been in war with China since Carter came into office, when the people who govern our nation took the bribes and started to build China up and tear America down. That was the declaration of war. And we've been in war for a long time. Our economy's been under pressure. So now it's going to change. Things are going to turn around. China, I want to go back to a couple of the things that will assure China falling. They've got a catastrophic demographic problem because of their one-child policy. They are 1.4 billion people, but they are the oldest population in the world. By 2030, half of the population will be retired. By 2050, that nation of 1.4 billion will be 600 million. It's already affecting the supply chain, because not only do they have disruptions because they're having rolling blackouts, because a lot of their electric is produced by hydroelectric, and the dams that generate that, the water's so low they can't generate the hydroelectric, but they have a manpower shortage. So let's compare that to America. America is the food basket of the world. It feeds 100 nations. We've got water. They don't have water. Their policies have damned them. So basically, they're 20% of the world's population with only 6% of the world's water. But guess what? That water is unequally distributed, and they have polluted, unlike America that has some responsibility as far as the ecology is concerned. 26% of their surface water is absolutely unusable for drinking, for agriculture, for anything. 46% of their groundwater is unusable. So they have a catastrophic food shortage coming upon them. So with a food shortage and a population shortage and a population that's already ready to go into revolt, China is definitely going to fall, in my opinion. So what that's going to do, now let's look at the situation they have geographically. They are surrounded by U.S. allies who are our allies because they fear China. So Japan is an ally, Taiwan is an ally, Australia is an ally, Singapore is an ally, Thailand is an ally, because the nations of the world believe that they inflicted the virus on us. They believe that they are championing the one world totalitarian government. So when all this changes, we're going to go back to where America is going to cease being a democracy, a socialist communist order. We're going to get our Constitution back again. We're going to get God back into our schools. Things are going to change. America is going to go back to its founding principles. We're going to be able to say the Pledge of Allegiance in church and in school. We're going to be able to go out and have the 10 Commandments on the courthouse. The things are going to change dramatically because God's kingdom is coming back. But what's that look like economically? It looks like the simple steps that we talked about before. We will get the control of our natural resources. We have more oil than any other nation in the world. We just have to open up the spigots. We have agreements in every nation for different natural resources. So we have the capability to have control of our own natural resources, control of our manufacturing, control of the trade, thanks to the new trade agreement that Trump put into place. That'll bring money rushing in, and America will be able to use that money to modernize. We have spent most of our money on wars, and we're going to come into a period of time where our enemies have been put on the ground level, and we're not going to have to spend as much money on wars as we did, and we're going to have money to invest in our economy and our infrastructure, and America is going to come roaring back. And here's what's going to happen. We had something after the Civil War called the American economic system, and it made us the greatest nation in the world. The youngest nation in the world became the greatest nation in the world in 34 years, because what we did is we developed the Transcontinental Railroad, we developed the Industrial Revolution, and then we did something unheard of. Instead of hoarding that technology, we shared it with the world, and all of the world was beginning to rise up in terms of its standard of living. It was the only economic system in the world that equalized, well, elevated the entire world. That system is going to be put back in place as we deglobalize. It will be a natural function that will just happen. And we're going to see, when you don't have people starving to death, when you don't have people having wars of aggression, you have peace. And when you have peace, you have prosperity. And that's what's going to be coming to this nation and to the world, is peace, prosperity, and God's kingdom on earth.
Well, you know what, Larry? I mean, the audience is hearing something very positive. That's the happiness. That's the joy. One of the things that Don and I always talked about is there's so many people right now today that have no hope. They just have despair. They just don't feel comfortable with this life that they have, and they have all kinds of things, depression and just anxiety and things like that. What you're telling us today is not about despair and anxiety and things like that. You're talking about a new world order that God's going to create. It's through God and the people in this country. No better place in the world than this country to retool ourselves. And it makes me feel really good to know that we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. We can pray in schools. We can take God back because he's going to be in the center of everything on this change, isn't he? Mm-hmm. And so this is a real positive thing.
Well, we're going to have you back on, because this has been a real pleasure. So Larry, thank you so much. Your book, Liberty Crusade, The Fight to Save the Free World. I cannot wait to read this. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Values the old time family. dream this land stays free under God, not tyranny. That's what it means to really dream. 1, 2, 3. Can I get a hoorah from a patriot like me? Can I get an amen? Do I hear a hallelujah? Can I get a hoorah from a patriot